Nominate the youth sports volunteer that you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. Submit your nomination at kslsports.com/contest and listen every Thursday afternoon to JJ and Alex for the winner. Help us celebrate the efforts of those volunteers making an impact with the Hercules Hero of the Week, sponsored by Hercules Credit Union and Beehive Meals.
The Boston Celtics are world champs. As we expected, they blew out Dallas in Game 5. And afterwards, Danny Ainge got a shout-out. And you might think that it came from Tatum, who he drafted, or Brown, who he drafted.
Brad Stevens, who he hired.
But the one that caught PK's ear came from the vet of vets, the old man, the leader.
Horford, yeah, very respected guy in his league. Obviously, his father played in the league, and
he's been
38 years old?
17 years in the league.
That's incredible.
4 different teams.
Good for him.
Second trip through the Celtic organization.
Yeah.
He's been back 3 years after going to Philly and OKC.
Right, and so he made a comment last night that I think is debatable.
And that would be?
I never forget what Danny Ainge told me in that meeting. He said, you can win championships in many places, but there's nothing like winning in Boston and nothing like winning as a Celtic. And that stuck with me from that meeting.
That was in his recruiting pitch. That stuck with him. And what Danny Ray told him, now he's experienced it. There's nothing like winning it in Boston. And that is the place where they have won the most titles, and so there you go. That is something that is special. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, and Ainge has got one, kind of got 2, but he certainly, inarguably, has got one. As well, he had, if you include his time as a player,
then he's got 4.
Then he's got multiple,
or 3, depending on how you want to count it.
As a player and as a manager in Boston. And so he knows of what he speaks because he experienced both of that. And winning in Boston is winning as big as it can get, right? Because Boston's a major city in our country, and it's a major sports town, and they've had legendary players for 70 years, and away they go, and we'll see how many they can get going forward. And I can argue, though, that you've done something that's only been done 17 other times. So good for you.
I will not forget, and it's just one shot, but the picture of everyone swarming the building, all the people who didn't have tickets, swarming the building in Milwaukee as the Bucks are winning the championship. It's like the whole city went into the streets. It was awesome. Mm-hmm. And so if you're in a place that gets one and I'm sure somebody from Denver would say, well, it was awesome and there were people. I just don't remember the shot. But when you get a title in a place that's never had one, or in the case of Milwaukee, hasn't had one in 50 years, and Denver had never won an NBA title, and you go down the list of any of the others, what's it like to win one in San Antonio when they don't have the NFL and they don't have Major League Baseball? I mean, you're it.
Oh, yeah, they have the NFL.
Because it's cowboy country.
Yeah, they have the NFL.
But it's Dallas. It's up there. They don't walk you. They don't walk you the streets of your town. It's 3 hours away.
It doesn't matter. It's so overwhelming. They're huge cowboy fans in Albuquerque. They are, literally.
They are.
Yeah.
And don't get me started on El Paso.
Well, sure. I've been in both those places many times. I think winning it here in Salt Lake City would be Danny Ray's greatest achievement. And he's achieved a lot. Oh, my gosh, he's achieved a lot. The guy is unbelievable. Yeah, he's the definition of winner. That's what I think of him. Because...
Well, then let's do some of that winning here.
I hope so, while I'm alive. The idea of winning here, there's no city in the NBA that takes as much crap as we do.
So it's more difficult.
It is. It is the most difficult place to win, without a doubt. And I've lived in 4 NBA cities. There's no doubt this place catches more crap.
You don't want to go there,
Right.
has been said more times about here than any other place.
Yeah.
And lots of people can say, oh, it's been said about here. And that's true.
But not like here.
Just not as often.
You could say, what places are hard to win? Well, all cold weather, but I think that's overblown.
Now that Milwaukee and Toronto have pulled it off to
Denver.
pretty cold places. Denver on top of that.
Yeah. Chicago.
Major market.
It is.
But cold.
It is. Boston. I think that stuff is overblown. Players, you don't have time to vacation in the season anyway. And so if you're serious about if you're serious about nightlife, then I don't want you anyway. Because you got a finite amount of time. If you want to ball out, then that's who I want. And if you're interested in the other stuff, well, you're going to raise eyebrows as far as I'm concerned. But you take who would be the second hardest that you would think? Charlotte, right? They've sucked.
Yeah, but I don't think it should be hard because of Charlotte.
No, but you look at Charlotte, and it's in North Carolina. Well, that conjures up Duke and North Carolina.
Basketball hotbed.
And Thurl would tell us about NC State. All NC State did was make the Final Four this year.
And a lot of players would want to, quote unquote, stay home, and they've had a lot of great players go through all those schools.
Or they want to go down from New York, where it's a little warmer and it's not super far away.
Which is literally how NC State and Duke, didn't they bring coaches in from New York to launch those programs?
Yeah. So you could think, well, that's a basketball hotbed. And here, well, we've got church build hoops in every church we've heard, and that's true. But still, it is so easy just to crack on Mormons. There'll be one dude who will yell one thing stupid at the Delta Center, and it's every single person in the state. Every last one of you is a hardcore racist. That's the reputation.
Sacramento and Salt Lake, 2 toughest places to win in the NBA.
Sacramento, I mean, they haven't gotten it done because they're drafting Marvin Bagley instead of Luka Doncic.
Well, there's certainly been some self-inflicted mistakes. But for a long time, now it's not true because they have the new arena downtown, but for a long time, Marco was north of town, and they brought in the kid from Georgia Tech. Is it Kenny Anderson?
Kenny Anderson?
Yeah.
He's a New Yorker who went down. Kenny Anderson?
Pick, yeah. And I saw the look on his face. How's the culture shock? And he goes, it's real. It's there. I mean, there was a parking lot outside the arena, and then outside the parking lot, there were sheep and goats grazing. And for a guy who grew up in New York and played at Georgia Tech, and all of a sudden, there's sheep and goats grazing outside the arena.
Okay, but that isn't anymore.
Nope, it's not anymore. You're right.
Right. So, and I know guys. I knew one that I was friends with who played in Sacramento, and they would just take limos down to the Bay Area.
Yep, that is the thing. It's 90 minutes to the Bay Area.
Yeah. So
because it's hot and flat, and it's a big suburb, and there's nothing going on.
Well,
the Kings are the show in town. There's no doubt about that. We'll see if the A's change that.
I figured Arnold Schwarzenegger wanted to live there.
In the governor's mansion.
Got himself in trouble, but nevertheless. Sure, it's harder there, but I don't think people are ripping, and it's acceptable. You just blast away. There's no repercussions for it. You go on there and basically say whatever you want. And we're just a punching bag. And Dennis, Lindsay, and the Millers, and Ryan Smith, they've been fighting like heck to overcome that. And
you were right there with Dennis. We heard about the partnership over the years.
Yeah. He and I were hand in hand, arm in arm.
How much progress do you think you've made?
Significant.
Really?
Yes. Not to the ignorant fan, but to the player. And you're not recruiting the ignorant fan. You're recruiting the player who has been here. And then you're recruiting his family and bring him here and see what it's about. And then you can go and you can run out the Carlos Boozers of the world who can tell you firsthand how it is.
That's where the progress has been made. Where the progress hasn't been made is convincing younger good players that that's really true. And I think the older player...
I think it has been made.
I think the older player who's been places can see that the grass isn't greener and that you got to value different things. But
today's player is more sophisticated than ever. He has been exposed to so much. He's played basketball in many different places, literally in some cases around the world. And
the more of that you have, the more it works in Utah's favor.
This number one recruit in the country.
Because he's
going to go down and play in Hurricane, and he's investigating BYU. Because he knows Kevin Young has a pathway to the NBA. So why wouldn't I look at that? And I think players, they're far more intelligent now. They're more worldly, not necessarily always in a negative sense. But
if you grew up in Russia and you played professionally in Spain, that's just different than going to the high school.
Yeah, I'm talking about the number one high school recruit, though, who has investigated BYU. So, yeah, I think they made significant progress. And if they haven't, just for argument's sake, if they haven't, there's enough foreign guys who don't give a crap where they are. And you can have the foreign guys make significant contributions.
That, I think, is the most important point. That the foreign guy, to your point about Worley, who's been many places
and speaks multiple languages,
many things, and in a lot of cases does speak multiple languages.
Yes,
is evaluating places differently than somebody who's grown up in one place, maybe gone to play college basketball for 1 year in another. And the whole going home thing, which is clearly, hurt the Jazz to some degree, that's just not going to be a factor. That's literally off the table for the foreign guys.
No, they haven't been home since they're 15 years old.
Right.
But you're talking about, let's call it like it is. I know you want to be hesitant, but let's talk about the black guy in the hood. That's who we're talking about. Let's put it out there because everybody knows that's what we're talking about.
That is what we're talking about, but it is not exclusively what we're talking about.
I think the black guy in the hood is far more sophisticated than he was 25 years ago.
But Hayward wanted to leave too.
He did, but he was an idiot.
Okay, but that goes against everybody's more sophisticated now.
Because of guys like Hayward, he's making them more sophisticated.
Well, that is actually, I like that point. Yeah. That's part. The story isn't just, hey, Carlos Boozer played in Miami, and he will tell you that Utah's a good place to play. Right?
Call him up.
He lives in Miami. He played in Chicago. He's right. Call Carlos, and he will tell you
the truth.
And Carlos will. But then it's also like, and the people who don't believe Carlos Boozer, how did it play out for them? How did it play out for Gordon?
Call Darren Williams. Call Derek Favors. Here's their numbers. Call Paul Millsap. There's a list. The list is literally practically never ending.
Okay, but now it just needs to work. The All-Star needs to stay. Right. But it hasn't. That's why when I said, have you made progress? Because so far, the All-Star who's had the chance to leave hasn't said, unless you go back to, Stockton and Malone, hasn't said, yeah, I could have gone, but I don't want to because I got it here, and we're building something here. Because what frustrates Jazz fan is it looks like something is building, and then the player wants out, whether it's Hayward who leaves on his own or Donovan Mitchell gets traded.
Yeah, you got me there.
Right. So it hasn't – the argument is there.
It's not going to be 100%.
The argument is there, and it feels like that pitch could work.
It will
work.
But
it hasn't yet.
Rory McIlroy in putts under 4 feet this season was 496 for 496.
I just heard that stat.
Now he's 496 for 498.
Things change.
It's going to happen. There's never going to be a guarantee. But I believe I have faith in people that they will do the right thing, despite all the crap that's out there in social media and all the stuff that we hear. You get an individual in a one-on-one situation. I'm a human being. You're a human being. We can relate to each other. We can find common ground. No matter what your background is, no matter what my background is, and they bring them in here, and they bring in Dwayne Wade, and yeah, I think it can get done. I don't know that you're going to lure a big-time free agent because I don't know that big-time free agents really move. What you want is to get a guy and keep him. I get that.
Keep your own guy and get him to sign the third contract.
Right, exactly. When he's available and there's no strings attached.
They sign the first because they're drafted and they have to.
Right.
They sign the second because that's how you get the big money. But the third is when they're in the prime of their career and it's winning time.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to get them to sign the third.
And I can argue what on their own were Hayward and Mitchell ever going to win you? According to Danny Ray, nothing. The guy who's won,
although at some point,
nothing.
At some point, he really did like Hayward. He helped get him to Boston.
Well, he wasn't here to re-sign Hayward.
Right, he was there.
Right.
To pull him away.
But Mitchell, who I think is a better player than Hayward, so that's why I went more with Mitchell. Danny Ray said, this guy's not good enough. So do I want him? Do I want to invest all that money into him? Did they made the decision? No. Now you could say, well, wait a second, man. Mitchell forced their hand. No, I think they made the decision irrespective of Mitchell forcing their hand. Listen to what his comments were.
They had to trade him, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to trade him.
Right.
Both things can be true at the same time.
Yes.
And he's standing over there, and you sit and watch games with people who know basketball more than you, and they're like, that guy's standing over there with his legs straight, just waiting for the defensive possession to be over. That is not championship basketball. That I heard that more than once. Mm-hmm. And you look over, and you're like, you're right. He is not poised to force a turnover.
I told you that, and I know more basketball than you. You're right.
You weren't the one who told me that.
No, but I told the person who told you.
That is actually possible.
I led to the assist that got the assist.
Oh, the hockey assist.
The hockey assist.
Yeah, and it's all about hockey now anyway. Who cares about basketball?
Bingo.
When we come back, Tim LaComb, Jazz radio studio analyst, Riley Jensen, mental performance coach and college football expert, join us at 9 o'clock. Stay with us, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
The Big 12 is exploring selling its naming rights in a lucrative and unique deal that could generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. The conference had discussions with insurance giant Allstate about a deal to change the league's name. New name possibilities for the Big 12 reportedly include the Big Allstate Conference and the Allstate 12 Conference.
In the same way that I don't care about jersey patches and advertisements on jerseys or whatever, I equally don't care about this. Now, it will be annoying when Allstate's out in 10 years and now it's the Sunkist 12 or whatever it is. Tito's Vodka 12. Yeah. How would that go over in Provo?
You know what? I guess I will disagree with you a little bit on the naming rights. Bowls have lost some value because the sponsor changes every year. There's just no history there. It feels different every single time, even if it's just a little bit.
Hear Jake Scott and Ben Anderson every day from 10 to noon on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Paul McCartney turning 82. We welcome in a guy who has probably sung a few Paul McCartney songs in his time. Tim LaComb, Jazz Radio Studio Analyst. Tim, good morning.
Good morning. We actually used to play that one back in the, on basically our first time around the sun as Party Hounds. We played that a ton in, we would play school events all through high school, and that was a song that we played just to kind of put the chaperones at ease. To say, hey, we speak your language too, and we will dabble in it from time to time. You got to consider everybody out there, even the chaperones.
The Party Hounds, making the generations feel good.
The Chaperones, that's a good name for a band.
That is not bad. Although I'm sure they would be boring. every chaperone I ever knew was boring.
Because you've never chaperoned.
Never.
Yeah.
No, last thing I'd ever think of doing is helping in that regard.
The Boston Celtics are the champions. Lessons that Jazz fans should absorb and apply to the rebuild here.
Well, it was quite a journey, and I think there were a lot of things along the way that put the Celtics, in that position last night. But the bottom line is, I think they put a team together, piece by piece, different ways that, at the end of the day, were very, very astute basketball-wise. But at the same time, I think we saw during the celebrations, always one of my favorite things, you see and hear, thoughts. And they're thoughts that are pretty unfiltered because, I think you saw it with Jason Tatum last night. The shock was evident. But along the way, the Jaylen Brown pick, the move that Ainge made that will always be historic, understanding that Philly was not interested in taking Tatum, trading, down, still getting Tatum. That was a big move. But I think you look at it, it was just little transactions and acquisitions along the way. I mean, the Porzingis thing looks crazy right now, but it came across the wire and everybody was like, man, what are the Celtics doing? I think probably the story above all else is that this thing does take time. It's not easy. But we're going into another acquisition window for the Jazz here with the draft coming up. And pay attention, pay attention to who's taken. I know that, in talking to Ainge through the years, he gets a really good feel on a handful of guys. And if he can make trades to move, to find, to get, that's what it's all about. So we're on the front end of that journey, but, the Celtics have been at this for a long time, had not won since, was it 2008? So it's been quite a journey in a place that loves championships. I have the most now of any NBA franchise, but I guess it's piece by piece. That's the lesson.
Did they win one when you were back there?
They did not.
Okay.
I was there about the time that Bird was laying on the floor when he come out of games.
Okay.
You remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Lay at the end of the bench.
Yeah.
But I did see him go for 40 one night in the Garden, so that will always be a cool memory.
How much do you love a kid like Drew Holiday?
Absolutely love him. He to me, he's what makes that team. They had to make a really big decision last year. They had to move off one of their foundational pieces in Marcus Smart. It was difficult for everybody involved. But, what it did was free up a spot to bring in a guy like Holiday. And, the one thing he understands above all else is who he is. And he's not trying to do too much. He's an absolute menace on the defensive side. So I thought, to me, he was the linchpin. I think he was the final straw. They had tried so hard to make it work with Smart, and he got him to a certain point. But, I thought it was gutsy, and really sometimes you got to make those types of moves. But that was a very, very important one because I don't think they win without him.
No, I agree.
We put so much emphasis on scoring, as well we should. And I know you can get all technical and break it down to points per possession, but it really caught my eye that every Celtic starter had 8 rebounds. And the more rebounds you get, the more possessions you have. And the whole points per possession, I get it, but never underestimate the value of having more possessions. They crushed Dallas on the offensive glass. They crushed them on the defensive glass. It doesn't matter if you're a big guy or a little guy. There's plenty of long rebounds off missed threes to run down. There's still rebounds to get that are contested right at the front of the rim. You still need to rebound if you're out of your area, maybe more than ever. And to have all 5 starters have at least 8 boards, that just seems like a winning formula that every team should be chasing every game.
There was a great amount of effort. It was on the heels of the game in Dallas. I had so many people ask me, like, what happened? And I honestly believe human nature is real. They were up 3-0. Mm-hmm. They'd gotten at least a sweep, and I think on their minds it was, let's get home and win in front of our fans. I thought the effort was supreme, and again, it's a pretty unique formula to be able to get guys to play that hard and do that. But with the length, the physicality, I think there's a lot of you can take from the Celtics in that regard. They were definitely toward the end there on both ends. They were just clicking. The ball was moving great. One of the things that they fought during the year was stagnancy on the offensive side from time to time, where they got too ISO happy. But when guys would just make a basketball play, see how the defense, to come to the ball, just move it quickly. Saw the number of extras and corner threes. But that coupled with the effort, supreme effort, you talked about it on the glass, but, contesting shots, getting out in passing lanes, making guys back cut, all those things, are a recipe to win. But I'm with you. Rebounding is a huge part of the game. And, some teams leave it to their big guys, but I love the fact that everybody, the Celtics, as a gang, they got involved and rebounded that basketball.
We all know about the Jason Tatum move that Mr. Ainge made, and it was just absolutely brilliant, right? But in order for him to make that move, there's got to be stupidity on behalf of other managers in his position. And I called up the draft, which was 2017. Philly takes Markelle Fultz as number one. WTF. And I think Ainge knew that the Lakers were in love with Lonzo Ball. And I'll give him somewhat of a pass because of the injuries, although he's been traded twice. But then Jason Tatum goes third. And then the Suns take Josh Jackson at fourth. So I can argue 3 of the first 4 picks sucked.
Do you really have to argue?
Well, Lonzo Ball.
Can you dumb that down just a little bit?
Yeah, right.
How can that possibly be? These people who are being paid all this money to do this and spend, not so much the money, but spend all this time researching and analyzing, and Markelle Fultz number 1 and Josh Jackson number 4. You have got to be kidding me. And that's the same draft that Markkanen went 7th. Nick Kalina, the Knicks taking him 8th. And Donovan Mitchell doesn't go till 13th. Bam Adebayo goes 14th. Behind guys like Dennis Smith, Frank Ntilikina, Zach Collins, Luke Kennard. Come on.
Yeah, it is baffling, but I'm telling you, Jake and I got locked into this. We have a lot of time in that studio.
Yes.
82 games, randomly probably 7 hours altogether. It's kind of like a full-time job at night. And so we end up talking a lot about things, and that was one thing we got locked on this year was at times the ineptitude of drafts. And you hear often that, it's a down draft and that, you're not going to get the level of talent. I do believe that the essence of the draft, and I've been a huge fan forever, is kind of getting out of the groupthink. These guys start getting put into positions by pundits and people around the league, a year before. And it's almost like the top 20 in college football. I mean, nobody's really done anything yet. They get locked into positions, and you'll see guys slide. But I think the essence of it is really understanding who these guys are, as people. I had a interaction at one point with Danny, and I talked to him about Tatum and how he knew that he was the guy in that, in that situation.
What did he say?
Because I was out recruiting, and Markelle Fultz was a phenom. Like, I was out that summer before, and everybody was saying, that this kid's going to be number 1. And so I asked Danny about it one day, and he said, you have to immerse yourself in these guys. I think it's often why you see Danny at grassroots events. Start to watch these guys really young and watch the people around them and watch the way they interact with their teammates. Watch all the things in between the cuts of tape, because you can talk yourself into loving somebody, on the basketball court. But I think, why the Celtics are good, you guys mentioned Drew Holiday, there has to be an adult in the room that says, look, we can't all be number ones. We've got to be able to structure this thing. And so character obviously is a huge part of this thing. But understanding who these guys are as players, it's not an exact science. And I think if you look through the draft, you'll find what you said, PK, more often than not. I mean, people will always hit, for the most part, at top of drafts when it's just easy. But putting teams together, finding the right guy, so hard and so easy, 10 years later or whatever, to look back and go, man, what a bunch of idiots. But the bottom line is the data and everything's out there to search. But there is just, when you're going through 50, 60, 70, 80 guys and pinpointing your guy, you just really have to have an understanding of what you want.
In an era when there's so much data and there's so many numbers and people are creating new numbers and making up numbers and abbreviations I can't ever hear of, there are still inefficiencies in the system that amaze me, and I find them so frustrating. And the Celtics have conquered one of them with Pritchard taking shots against the buzzer at the end of the quarter. The number of times that you watch the end of a quarter and a guy lets a 50-footer go 1 second after the buzzer so that it doesn't wreck his shooting percentage. Well, why don't they just sort those out? And this doesn't really affect his shooting percentage because we know he's taking low percentage shots at the end of a quarter. But the boost you get from the points, from igniting the crowd or quieting the crowd, Pritchard hit one against Cleveland. He hit 2 long buzzer beaters in the finals. And in the video, he's done it so many times in practice and games now, and regular season games we ignored, that in the video, when they pan and follow the ball as he hits the shot at the end of the half, the bench is up and dancing. They're already anticipating it going in because he had so much space when he launched it. Why don't other teams looking for an edge take advantage of that?
It's one of those silly things. I've always kind of thought, and it goes way back. I mean, I had a guy I knew who was trying to, this was back in the 80s, but he's in high school and he's worried about his shooting percentage back then. So he'd get the ball at the end of the half and wouldn't shoot those types of shots. And I think it just became a thing. But there's a lot of things like that, that are self-centered. They're not team-oriented. And, I think you bring up Pritchard and his contribution. I mean, Pritchard's a guy who I remember he was not slotted to go as high as he went. But again, Ainge saw a guy who could be a great piece, right? Yeah. And he jumped up and got him, and everybody's scratching their head. But he's not the guy. He's not even the guy, but he's a guy. And he's a guy on that bench that just wants to win. To your point, I think the more you can make basketball less about an individual and their stats, and you can make it about a team, that's when you're getting closer. When it moves off, one guy worrying about shooting the ball, it's going to affect this or that, and you just play the game. I mean, I think that in its truest form, what it's all about.
Tim, we appreciate it as always. I know you're doing draft homework, and next week when we talk to you, the draft will be upon us. We look forward to that. We will talk to you then.
You guys are the best. Have a great day.
Tim LaComb, Jazz radio analyst, here on the broadcast, pregame, halftime, and postgame. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present...
This is JJ and Alex.
Utah's not the only team that can say some of these things, that they've got, the strength coach, starting quarterback, the coordinators, and the head coach back. Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Utah, West Virginia. That's a long list in the Big 12 of teams that have stability. And I'm going to bet on stability every time. And if you're a BYU fan who's wondering why are media down on us, because there's a little bit of instability at the quarterback position. We saw it last year. it's got to be better. And once it's better, BYU will be taken seriously in the Big 12. But until then, you're going to start seeing stuff like the 16th best quarterback room in the Big 12. They're going to start picking you 12th out of 16 teams for the conference championship. So BYU's going to have to earn that.
Catch JJ and Alex afternoons from 3 to 6. Presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Win tickets Wednesday. Preempted by a holiday tomorrow. So we got to win tickets Tuesday. Sticks, Foreigner, Utah First Credit Union. You want to go? Be caller 12 right now, 801-575-ZONE. 801-575-ZONE. You'll see them at the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater on June 26th. Sticks and Foreigner, 801-575-ZONE.
What amphitheater?
Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater.
Yeah. A lot of shows out there.
Yes, fact.
Have you seen any?
No.
Seen many.
What's the last one you saw?
The last one I saw, let's see, Dierks Bentley maybe? Yeah, that's probably it. A couple years back.
There you go.
Kid from Phoenix who made it big. Of course, he was born Fred Bentley.
Yeah.
I mean, Dierks is his middle name. He's got restaurants there, restaurant bars. He's got a cool one in downtown Gilbert. A lot of our listeners have relatives in Gilbert for obvious reasons. And if you go to
Gilbert right next to Mesa on the east side of the valley?
Sort of, yeah, basically.
Yeah.
It was a big, nothing but a farming community when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
Now it's bustling.
Is it a little south of there?
Of
Mesa.
Yeah, a little southwest. But they got a cool old downtown, and he's got a big, Dierks Bentley's got a big restaurant right there, and open windows and all, and you can look in. They got some fairly decent musical acts, local stuff there. Yeah. So that was probably the last one. Ooh, look at this, man. Yak? Oh, he's on the phone? A kid named Ethan Tuttle tweets out, I'm thrilled to announce I've accepted as a position of news reporter. And he's going to go to be a news reporter. He's a kid graduating from ASU in Baton Rouge. And Dillingham, way to go. I'm so proud of you, blah, blah, blah. The way you have to use social media as an avenue to get your name and your product out there, right? It's so important these days. We're talking about getting guys to want to come to Utah. And I think Ryan Smith does that in a way that is, he uses social media to promote the state. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important. Every little thing. I don't know that one thing matters the most, but everything matters the most. And it's cool the way he does that. Now, with all that in mind, you still got to draft well. And you go back and you look at these drafts that I just said with Tim LaComb. How does Phoenix take a Josh Jackson at 4th? How do you take Markelle Fultz at 1? How do you do that?
How do you not draft Luka Doncic in Phoenix and then, when it doesn't work out, fire the guy who told you to draft Luka Doncic?
Because it didn't work out.
He's literally the guy who said draft Luka Doncic, and they blew him off. Well, this isn't working, so you're gone. I'm the only one who got it right. And they fired him.
Well, they did get to the finals with DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah.
But he was long. You're talking of Koshkov, and he was long gone. Yeah. That's why, man, these next few weeks
are
for the Jazz
everything.
Can really shape the next minimum 5 years. The draft, whatever they do, and then into July.
I can't argue with minimum 5 years, but can easily shape 10.
It can.
Easily.
It can. But you can overcome crappy moves.
They need it to shape 10. They need to get someone.
Man, that would 10 would be seen. That would be on.
Well, if you draft a 19-year-old to 29,
But they'd be able to get that right, though.
The number of guys who, and you can draft somebody who you trade for the guy. I mean, that absolutely can happen.
Yeah. So Ryan Smith, I think, does an excellent job with social media and promoting Utah. Mm-hmm. He's so outstanding with that, and they can do that. But then even if he didn't do that, and even if everybody hated Utah, they could still build a really good team through the draft, which is what they did.
If you can keep the guys, or if you can trade them for people. Eric Lechner was not a great draft pick by the Jazz, but he was good enough to combine with Bobby Hansen and get Jeff Malone, and then they traded Jeff Malone for Jeff Hornacek.
Eric Lechner was an outstanding player. What are you talking about?
In college, he was an outstanding player.
He's a Cowboy.
I know, I'm aware. Wyoming, baby.
Have you been in Arena Auditorium?
I've been by it. I've not been in it.
I've been in it.
I was there in the summer. Yeah.
If you've been in the Huntsman Center, it's the exact same thing. In fact, they modeled it after the Huntsman
Center. That and the D Event Center look like the same architect did all three buildings.
Yeah.
Some telltale design.
But I think that they can keep guys, man. I really believe that, because when they did that, what was different about those guys back then? The statues, Thurl, blah, blah, blah. They kept those guys.
They did.
Don't let Mitchell and Hayward.
And Boozer and D-Well.
Yeah, but they got a lot out of those guys.
They did. The thing is that they really only had one era with those guys, where with Stockton and Malone, they basically had three eras. They could have rebuilt around them. Okur was done. He torn his Achilles. Mm-hmm. They could have, Kirilenko's contract is finally up. Go invest that somewhere else and have another group around those guys. But it was not to be.
They'll get this done.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Coming up next, Riley Jensen, mental performance coach and college football expert. We will talk college football quarterbacks and a certain golfer who mentally has to get himself in a better place so he can bounce back at the Open Championship next month. We'll talk Rory McIlroy with Riley next. Stay with us.